Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. If you're gearing up for your next management exam, well, you've landed in the exact right place. Consider this your ultimate masterclass review session. We're taking Chapter 10, Managing Organizational Structure and Culture, and distilling the whole shebang into a visual study guide. We're going to cut through the noise and highlight exactly what you need to know. We'll be breaking down the key definitions, the core management theories, and all those models that your professors absolutely love to test.
Here's our roadmap for today. 1. The big picture. Architecture. 2. Designing motivating jobs. 3. Types of organizational structures. 4. The hierarchy of authority. And 5. Integrating mechanisms.
Let's jump right into part 1, the big picture architecture. Okay, so the absolutely crucial starting point here is this definition of organizational architecture. Seriously, mark this down because it's highly testable. When you see the word architecture on an exam, don't just immediately think about a basic org chart. Architecture is actually the combination of multiple systems working together: the structure, the control systems, the culture, and the human resource management systems. It's how all these elements interact that ultimately dictates how efficiently and effectively an organization uses its resources. Think of it like a giant puzzle. It's the entire ecosystem of the company.
Now, take a look at how this visual quadrant breaks down the actual forces that shape that architecture. You can't just, pick a structure out of a hat. Managers have to look at 4 key factors: the organizational environment, technology, human resources, and strategy. For instance, if your strategy requires rapid, nonstop innovation, you're going to need a very different structure than a company that's just focused on low-cost mass production. Or if the technology you use is super complex, well, your structure has to accommodate the highly specialized skills of your human resources. As you can see, these 4 arrows all point inward, meaning they collectively determine the actual design of your organizational structure.
Moving right along to part 2, Designing Motivating Jobs.
So, zooming in from the macro level, everything at the micro level starts with job design. This is a fundamental vocabulary term for your exam. Job design is simply the process by which managers decide how to divide tasks into specific jobs. Basically, it's the division of labor in action. And how you divide those tasks has a massive, undeniable impact on whether your employees come to work energized or just completely exhausted.
And right here is a classic exam trap you absolutely need to be ready for. Professors love testing the difference between job enlargement and job enrichment. Pay really close attention to the wording on this one. Job enlargement is about increasing the number of different tasks in a given job. Think of it as a horizontal expansion. You're just giving someone more things to do at the exact same level of difficulty to prevent them from getting bored. Job enrichment, on the other hand, is about increasing the degree of responsibility a worker has. This is a vertical expansion. You're empowering them to make decisions, develop new skills, or literally measure their own performance. So quick recap: enlargement equals more tasks, enrichment equals more responsibility.
To truly master this idea of job enrichment, you gotta know the job characteristics model. This is basically your mental checklist for what makes a job intrinsically motivating. Definitely memorize these buckets. First up, task identity. Does the worker actually get to be involved in a project from the very beginning to the very end? We all love seeing something through to completion, right? Second, task significance. Does the worker feel their task is actually meaningful to the wider organization? And third, feedback. Does the worker get direct, crystal clear information about their job performance? When a job hits all these characteristics, employee motivation naturally skyrockets. All right, let's hit part 3, types of organizational structures.
Once we have individual jobs designed, we need to group them together. Managers have a few fundamental choices for doing this, and we call these departmentalization bases. The main categorical buckets you need to know for the exam are functional, divisional, matrix, and product team structures. A functional structure groups people by their skills, like putting all the marketing folks together in one room. Divisional groups them by product, market, or geography. But actually, let's look a little closer at one of the more modern, team-based approaches. In the product team structure, notice how you have a CEO sitting up at the top, along with functional managers for engineering, sales, product design, and R&D. But underneath all of that, the organization forms these cross-functional teams focused on very specific manufacturing units. The source material highlights Northwestern Mutual as a totally stellar example of this. They brought together managers from totally different departments specifically to redesign visuals for their customers. It breaks down those traditional walls between departments and creates a permanent, hyper-focused team tailored to a specific organizational task.
Okay, part 4, the hierarchy of authority. Now that we have teams, we need to establish the chain of command. Let's lock down exactly what we mean by authority.
It is the power to hold people accountable for their actions and to make decisions concerning the use of organizational resources. I want you to really remember that pairing for the exam. Authority is inherently linked to accountability and the control of resources. Simply put, if you don't control the resources, you don't really have the authority.
This organizational chart for McDonald's perfectly maps out how authority flows out there in the real world. Focusing right on the CEO, Chris Kempczinski, this visual demonstrates the concept of span of control. Span of control simply means the number of subordinates who report directly to a manager. Look at that blue box at the top and count the orange boxes directly beneath it. You can visually see Kempczinski's span of control right there. He has presidents of the USA and international divisions, plus global chiefs for people, communications, finance, supply chain, and marketing, all reporting directly to him.
Within that hierarchy, you're going to find two totally different types of managers, and setting up this direct comparison is a must for your test prep. You have line managers and staff managers. A line manager is someone in the direct chain of command who has formal authority over people and resources at lower levels. They're your primary decision makers driving the core operations. A staff manager, conversely, is responsible for managing a specialist function, like finance or marketing. They are the expert advisors. So the easy way to remember it, line managers give the orders, staff managers give the advice.
So, where should the bulk of this authority actually sit? Well, that's the age-old debate between centralization and decentralization. Centralization keeps authority at the very top. The textbook uses a fantastic success story here. Banner Health centralized its facility management practices and reduced energy expenses by nearly $12 million in just the first few years. Centralization is phenomenal for consistency and cost saving. Decentralization, on the flip side, gives lower-level employees the right to make important decisions. Why do this? To be flexible and extremely responsive. When the market environment is changing rapidly, the people on the front lines need the authority to act fast without waiting around for approval from top brass.
But regardless of whether you centralize or decentralize, there's kind of this golden rule for hierarchy. David Novak of Yum Brands captured it perfectly with his minimum chain of command rule. He said top managers should always construct a hierarchy with the fewest levels of authority necessary to efficiently and effectively use organizational resources. Why is this so critical? Because taller organizations, those with layers upon layers of authority, really struggle. As hierarchy levels increase, communication gets wildly distorted, decision-making slows to a literal crawl, and costs go way up. So keep it as flat as possible while still maintaining control.
And finally, Part 5, Integrating Mechanisms.
The big takeaway for this section is that your coordination tools literally have to scale up as your organizational complexity increases. You walk up this ladder of escalating complexity based on how severe your communication barriers are. If the problem is super simple, you might just use a liaison role, one person from marketing casually talking to one person from R&D. If it's a bit more complex, you form a task force, a temporary committee. If it's an ongoing, highly complex issue, you build permanent cross-functional teams. And if the organization is just massively complex, you actually create entirely new integrating roles and departments whose single, solitary job is just to coordinate everyone else.
This chart visually cements that exact concept. If you follow the arrow on the left from simple to complex, you see it play out. Up at the top, you have direct contact and liaison roles, just two little green circles connecting. Pretty easy. But as you move down the chart to task forces and cross-functional teams, you start seeing more circles, more lines of communication, and these permanent structures being formed. Finally, all the way at the bottom, you have the integrating role, represented by that heavy yellow square, sitting permanently between the washing machine division and the television division. It visually proves that as your company structure gets more tangled and complex, your tools for forcing communication have to get heavier and way more formalized.
Well, that brings us to the end of our masterclass explainer on Chapter 10. We've covered the macro architecture, the micro job designs, the structures, the flow of authority, and the integrating mechanisms. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a provocative question to help you synthesize all this for your exam. Think back to our very first definition on organizational architecture. If a sudden massive shift in technology completely changed your organizational environment tomorrow, which piece of your architecture would break first? Would it be your job designs, your hierarchy, or your integrating mechanisms? Pondering how these pieces domino into each other is exactly how you move from just memorizing vocabulary words to truly mastering the material. Thanks so much for learning with me today, and hey, good luck on that exam. You're going to crush it.